All right, everyone. Welcome to the SCMAS meeting. I guess I'm kind of your host. I'm the president, Rick Carroll, and for those of you guys that don't know, so this is our second Zoom meeting since COVID started. We usually meet once a month at the IHOP in Santa Ana on 17th Street. And, the IHOP, we're not able to meet there because of this virus. So we decided to go ahead and go with the Zoom meetings. When we kind of saw it was inevitable, that was the only way we were going to meet. So cool thing is with Zoom, it's much easier to get speakers because they don't have to really set aside more than a couple hours of their time to help us out. So this month we have Jake Adams, and Jake is a great friend of mine, and I actually heard Jake on an interview with the Reefer in Brazil. And I was kind of blown away by some of the things he was saying because, we really don't listen to the stuff Jake says anyway. But I thought his talk on flow, on lighting, and things like that were just amazing information. Decided to try them out for myself. I'm having great success with the changes that I made in my flow. Hopefully you guys may get something out of this too, if the topic turns that direction. But Jake's got a lot of great information about reefing and looks at reefing in a whole different way than the rest of us do. So it's pretty interesting. So Jake, are you ready?
Yeah, I hope you remember some of the points from the Brazilian talk, or if they come back to you, just bring them up, because I don't remember exactly what I discussed, because he was asking me questions and then I was just kind of answering them.
Right. So you know what? Let's start off with some of the things I saw that you were doing. You were doing a lot of setting up tanks rather quickly. As far as
I guess I should touch upon maybe the broader philosophy that I have about coral aquariums.
Yes.
Before, I was keeping saltwater tanks before reef tanks were really well understood, mid-90s. I still remember this one article where this guy was saying that it was probably impossible to keep stony corals in an aquarium. And then a couple months later, there was an article where someone had documented a fire coral growing 1/4 of an inch. And they were super excited. So, definitely when it comes to the reef aquarium hobby, you can learn a lot by knowing the history of how we got here. So before we understood anything, we were really under the impression that in order to keep corals, you had to recreate the entire ecosystem. And I feel like the conversation has not moved beyond that very much since 1996. We're still talking about setting up reef tanks with live rock and sand and refugium and pods. And how many mystery illnesses can happen in a reef aquarium. And so what's interesting is I don't really use live rock per se. I use any kind of rock, and it turns live over time. But the longer that I keep saltwater aquariums with corals in it, the more that I want to strip everything out of there, right? I don't need no sponges. I don't need no coralline algae. I don't need any algae. I don't need feather dusters, tube worms, anything. And when I was really young, I realized that on a long enough timeline, everything becomes a pest. Everything becomes a problem, right? If you have something that's doing well in your ecosystem, you don't have the whole ecosystem to keep everything in check. So, certain tube worms will build up in your sump and clog your pumps. Even snails, snails could spawn and the babies get up the baby snails get up on the pipes and they can clog stuff up and cause catastrophic problems. If you have a densely branching stony coral, things you don't want will start growing at the base. And so there is nothing that says you need to keep corals in anything more than a box of water with the right chemistry and bacteria to do some of those biological processes.
Interesting. So, so saying that, what types of tanks are you setting up there, in your facility?
Just so for some of you that don't know, I basically have a fish store that's just for me. There's nothing for sale. It looks like a bunch of different work tanks. And since most people have one or two tanks and they kind of want to keep a little bit of everything, we're all doing the hardest thing possible. And that is trying to cram all the corals into a 4-foot space or a 6-foot space and finding those little micro environments where they can go. And so that's the hardest thing to do, but you also compromise on the environment that you're providing for each coral, right? If you put 10 different types of corals, even in a 100-gallon tank, you're making compromises for some of those types of corals. So the whole point of the studio is like, man, I really wanted to get hyper focused. So I have a tank set up for mangroves and clams. I got a tank set up just for euphyllia. I got a tank set up just for soft corals. I got one for kind of high flow LPS, and I got a few more LPS today, and I realized I didn't have enough low flow zones, so I'm going to be setting up a new tank soon that's going to be oddly low flow, especially for me. And you just kind of repeat that time and time again. And no sand. And when I was setting up the tanks, there was a little bit of urgency to start creating some content. Man, I didn't introduce nothing. It all comes on the smallest coral base, has seeds of the entire reef ecosystem. So like, for example, one of the things I've already starting to manage is coralline algae. I have sand in my tanks. I didn't add it. It's all coralline algae that falls off and just kind of creates sand down the bottom. And so one of my long-term goals with every tank is actually I'm going to have to reset every single one of them. And the first one that's going to get this treatment is my next new 400-gallon aquapora tank. Never going to put a base in there. It's going to be only tips, and that's going to hurt a little bit, because I got some colonies of acros this big. No, I'm just never going to put a colony in there. It's always going to have to be tips, and they're going to have to go in a different tank. And my goal is to never introduce any kind of algae at all. Wow,
that's crazy.
It isn't, though. It isn't.
No,
if you walk up to somebody's tank, you can't look at it and say, oh man, it looks like you add a lot of phytoplankton to your tank. It looks like you have a lot of pods. It looks like you have a bunch of mysis shrimp swimming off in the corner. And if you can't noticeably recognize some features of a reef tank that somebody's doing, then you don't need them.
No, I know. When I say it's crazy, it's crazy to me because probably 10 years or so ago, we were having a discussion where you were talking about putting just a coral, the only thing, just the coral in a single tank. And it'd just be a tank for that one coral. And we all thought, okay, that's interesting. I mean, it was so unconventional. And even here today, it's still 10 years later, it's still unconventional.
But if you think of yourself, like everybody here, if you've had a tank for more than 1 year, something has grown out of control for you that you didn't want, whether it was a coralline, sponges, sea squirts. I think I might have a little bit more problems. Well, we're not talking about reef pests because those are a little bit more obvious. But like even corals, right? Palithoa, blue anthelia, green star polyp, fire coral, anything that can get really happy and really healthy over a long period of time. Just play it forward in your mind. You're like, that's going to be a problem, and that's going to be a problem, and I would never add that to your tank, right? You would never add a cold coral to your tank. And I think I have more problems with sponges because I do have a little bit more silicate in my water. So, man, I rip out so much sponges from certain places that I never added.
Well, yeah, that explains it because, you know, I added, when I started my 25 gallon, I added sponge to the sump, you know, just a little dish, and it grew like crazy, but it pretty much stayed confined to the dish. Now it's worked its way out of the dish into the tank. It's in the rocks and so forth. But, you know, there has been instances in certain areas where it's gotten out of control. And I'm like, damn, I wish I didn't put that sponge in there. So I didn't put any sponge in the 250 gallon. So I went without, you know.
So I'm going to take it one step further. With the Acropora tank, I am not going to add a single piece of rock.
Yeah.
No rock, right? Let that mind blow just sink in. And that's one thing that's been holding me back because I want a kind of a perfect, kind of a faux epoxy reef with, you know, imagine a fish tank with all the coral inserts. You just take off all the coral inserts and then you start putting real corals on there. You know, because I also don't want anything to mess with the chemistry. I don't want anything to absorb or release heavy metals or nutrients or what have you.
Exactly.
So that tank, you know, I think it's going to be really crazy because my goal is to, like, you know, 2 to 3 years in, it's just going to be black. You know, if you have any problems with Aptasia or hair algae or Valonia, they are not supernatural beings. If you never add it, you'll never have to deal with it. You know what? I have, I don't know, like 10 or 12 tanks. 90% of my problems and maintenance is managing all this shit. I don't have algae problems, but sponge growth, tube worm growth, Aptasia, you know, it's you can get ahead of Aptasia and then you just have a couple left and just kind of like back off a little bit and then, you know, they come back. So I think this is guaranteed for the future of reef tanks. And the way I can make that prediction so boldly is, like, you just look at planted tanks. They have tissue culture plants.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the messed up part is Petco and PetSmart was carrying tissue culture plants before actual fish stores. Right? So you get tissue culture plants, no snails, no algae. If you never introduce blackbeard algae, you're never going to have it. If you never introduce snails, you're never going to have that problem. Right? So think on a 10-year, 20-year timeline, our corals are going to be so clean and no one's going to be adding live anything unless they really want that. And the easy reef approach is going to be this more clinical, okay, what do I actually want in this tank?
Gotcha.
You know, all right, here's like an open poll for everybody. You guys all have power heads, right? How often do you have to clean them? Because of algae, Valonia, tube worms, coralline. So imagine you never introduce those things. Then you almost practically never have to clean your power heads or your pumps. You'll have a little bit of still mineral buildup where the pump gets hot, you know, so maybe once a year, twice a year, get a little mineral bath. But imagine your pump is just always working, and it's always working like it was on day one. Unless you have a cheap G-bow, because the magnetic strength of those actually decays over time, but that's another topic.
Jake, the master of equipment, knows it all. Yeah, definitely. So, so let's progress into your thoughts on your choice of equipment when you're setting up a reef. I notice when I see your videos and whatnot, you try to stay really simple, and a lot of people can't believe it because you're such an advanced reefer, and most people regard an advanced reefer as someone who overcomplicates a reef.
Well, I mean, if you really break it down, there's only a few core functions that need to happen to keep a reef tank alive. Number one is temperature, right? That's what kills things the fastest. So you need heater, temperature management, and I'm in Colorado, so it's pretty mild. Number two is evaporation. Number three is water flow. And number four would be lighting. And so if you address those few core components, then you're fine, especially taking into account some of the things I've talked about. One good pump is so much better. It is going to, all right, so here's an example. Coralia did a lot to popularize the propeller pumps, right? They dominated the market. I don't know what happened to them since, but they dominated the market. But those pumps were weak, right? So when you put them in your tank, they were really good. But if they get a little bit of crud, or if they get just a little bit of obstruction to the intake strainer, or a little bit of biofilm on the propeller or whatever, their performance just, they're still working, they're still turning, but they really work off of efficiency, right? They have 4-watt pumps, they have 8-watt propeller pumps. And if they're super clean, if they're like in a clean room, they work really, really well. But if you pick out some of the better equipment, and I am very fortunate to have great relationships, and I've been collecting this stuff all my life, then a Vortec MP40 can get that, or a Vortec or a Seche or a Gyre, maybe a little less Gyre, but some of these stronger, higher powered, efficient pumps, they can kind of push through that biofilm, right? A little biofilm on the impeller is not going to slow them down dramatically. A little bit of obstruction of the intake strainer is not going to kill the flow. So if you apply that idea to everything, and I've worked at fish stores, so I know what I've fixed for people. I know what it needs, a lot of maintenance. And you know what? If you have one tank, it's not that big a deal to have lots of bells and whistles, and that kind of makes it fun. But when you have 10 to 12 tanks, and you know that every piece of equipment requires some degree of regular maintenance, it really starts adding up. So the streamlined reef equipment approach, I turned that up a little bit more when I set things up here at the studio.
Okay. So now we're going to get to my favorite part of this discussion, which is flow. And I heard you mention your thoughts on flow during that meeting. And I had heard you talk about gyre flow and so forth before. And I hear people, in our hobby talk about gyre flow. But for some reason, the way you put it changed the game for me. It completely changed the way I thought about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your philosophies on flow when it comes to a gyre flow?
So when I was in college, I went to school for marine science, and Dana Riddle was covering, a lot of the aspects of light biology, how light hits a coral. And Sanjay was really smothering everything we needed to know about light generation, light coming out of a fixture, from the ballast to the bulb to the spectrum to the reflector, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to focus on something that was ignored, and that was water flow. And the more I dug into it, the more that water flow totally dictates everything. And there's a lot of misconception still, even though I've spelled it out in 5-part articles, about what random chaotic water flow means. I think this is the part that clicked for you during that conversation. So when people think random flow, there's two aspects of flow that are important for a reef tank. One of them is for the biology of the corals and everything that can't breathe on its own, right? So clams have gills, fish have gills, worms kind of have gills, and they breathe actively. But mostly we're talking about corals, right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect is ecological. The water flow moves everything around your tank and keeps the detritus in suspension, and it gets it down to the filter where it can be filtered out and processed. But the random chaotic water flow we're talking about applies mostly to the biological aspect. So people think that random flow means that you need to have these flow just kind of little explosions over here and over there, but that is not accurate at all. The randomness that biologists are talking about for diffusion and to drive photosynthesis and the respiration of passive creatures. Now we're talking about corals. Corals don't have lungs, they don't have gills. The polyp is a multi-purpose Swiss Army knife of biology. It's how they breathe, it's how they eat, it's how they excrete, it's how they breathe, it's how they fight. So the random flow that people have been discussing, it's funny because they're not wrong, but they're thinking on a scale of inches to feet. But where it really matters is in less than a millimeter, right? At that scale, when you get really, really small, water is like syrup. You know, some of you guys may have heard this. When you get really small scale, that's why copepods don't have fins. They have spines. They literally like kind of grab the water. They kind of like walk through the water. It's kind of cool because the water is viscous at the very, very fine scale. Okay, so the gyre flow was an attempt to generate fast water flow speed with power heads before propeller pumps came on the market. It's like, all right, well, you had some top pumps. Remember those top loading pumps that you had a little bracket for on your tank because the motor was so big you couldn't get it in the tank? Or like maxi jets and what was the other one? Mag drives. You know, we didn't have all this technology, so we had to be super efficient. So gyre flow was an idea to get pumps moving together, right? Moving the water flow faster, because at a faster speed, you break down that boundary layer. You know, imagine this is like tenfold, like this, you know, magnified. You break down that boundary layer, so you're mixing up the water that's getting closer and closer to the coral. It's that fast flow speed. I think this is the analogy you're looking for. If you're driving your car 10 miles an hour and you hit a tree, there's not going to be much turbulence in your brain. But if you hit that tree at 100 miles per hour, you're going to joggle your noggin and you're going to have some problems. So this is where you want the random flow. This is where you want the chaotic flow at the tiniest little levels of the corals. That being said, gyre flow is the most efficient way to get all the water moving in one direction. And you don't have to worry so much about getting the flow into the rock or in between the coral, because the faster the flow moves all in one direction, the more you're going to have turbulent eddies. They're going to pick that stuff up. That's within the coral and that's in between your rocks. And you know, the best thing you can do to improve the water flow in your tank is take out some rock. I mean, everybody has too much rock. Is that what you were getting at, Greg?
Yes. Now, one of the things you also came up with was a speed that you needed the water to be at to create that type of flow.
So it's a loose metric, right? None of this is hard and fast rules. But in reef ecology, that's the study of the entire thing, not individual animals, but maybe where those animals are placed. there's a kind of a good hard and fast rule that a healthy reef generally experiences 20 centimeters per second. Let's just call it about a foot per second, 1 meter above the tank. So 3 feet above the reef, it's going a foot per second. Because you know that if it's a foot per second above, 3 feet high, it's going to slow down and it's going to slow down, but you still have enough flow up high to drive and break down that boundary layer where it's happening. And this, this doesn't just apply to coral respiration and coral photosynthesis. We're also breaking down the biofilm that's on the rock. We're also driving the reactions of the bacteria that are on the rock. So I think it was Rich. He has, what was it, the wavy seas, or what's that thing called? Sea squirrel. Oh my God, I think that is the stupidest thing ever. Unless your tank is totally packed with coral and you really just can't get water flow into it. Because if you move all the water in your tank, that should be the goal. Move as much of the water all in unison, all together. You don't need something like a wavy sea that's just kind of like squirting. It's just kind of squirting back and forth. And it's just another thing to break, and it's another thing to mess with, and it put back pressure on your pump, reducing your flow overall. So there are some cases, and again, if you have one tank and you want a lot of bells and whistles, no judgment. But tell us what you did after you heard that.
So after I heard that, so I had basically had these 3 Tunzi Stream 3s. I had one on the back blowing in a gyre, and then I had one or 2 of them on the ends blowing, towards the front of the tank, just to try to create some chaotic flow. Now, at that time, I really didn't have any corals in the tank, so it's really, really, really hard to judge what kind of flow I had in the aquarium. So after hearing that, I decided to take all 3 of my Tunzi Stream 3s and place them all on the back wall, because one of the things you had said in that interview was you'd rather see people get their water going all the same direction than dealing with alternating flow, if they can't properly do it. And so I put them all, I put 2 on the back, and then one of them kind of what I thought was helping the gyre going straight. And it was good, but when I moved that 3rd one, at that point is where I think I got to that 20 centimeters a second, because it kicked up the most massive detritus in the tank. And when I would put food in the tank and so forth, I would see the food's going all different directions. It's not just following in a nice circle around the tank. Even though my rockscape is in the middle, even on the rockscape, it's hitting the rocks and it's turning and swirling. I had put corals in the tank, in the gyre area. They slid across the bottom, moving towards the gyre, because they were hitting a rock. It was creating an eddy behind it, and they were moving towards it. So, it's just amazing how much more flow you get once you get it to that speed. And I'm now running these Tunzi Stream 3s at 50%, and I was trying to put some corals down into the tank with some tongs, and I was really having a hard time because all of the water is moving, and I'm trying to, work these tongs, and it's just pushing it,
Yeah.
It's a lot of flow. It's a whole lot of flow. And I think we should try.
I see a lot of maybe confused faces. They might be wondering, well, what the hell does 20 centimeters per second mean, right? So let's make it standard. Let's call it a foot per second. And if you want to measure that, it's really quite simple. Just pick 2 points in your tank, roughly a foot apart. And when you put food in there or you see little particles, just, you know what a second is. If it takes 1 second to go from here to there, or if it, kind of goes like that, it doesn't really make it. And also, that is actually an upper maximum, right? So if you're getting half that, you're still in the ballpark, but that unidirectional flow is better for the biology of your reef tank and of your corals, right? So that's the thing you can do literally right when you get off the Zoom call, or you could turn around at a reef tank, put some flake food, and just kind of watch it, you know. And once you've done it enough times, you build it in. You don't need it anymore. Just like lighting, you know, most of us, I see a lot of old faces here. Most of us don't need a par meter to know if it's bright or if it's too bright or if it's too dim.
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting to practice. But when you get that whole water movement going, and that's how you get to the point where you're using one large piece of equipment or larger instead of 3 medium ones. You know, it really is so much more efficient.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, lighting. Let's talk about lighting. Hold on, Jake. What? Oh, I think you froze up. Did you freeze up or did I freeze up? Is there anybody that can?
It's Jake.
He's frozen
It's
for
Jake.
me.
Frozen. Okay.
Yeah, you're good, Greg.
Okay. I'll text him and let him know that he's frozen.
Great show. I'm enjoying it so far.
Good.
We're glad you enjoyed it because that's the end of it.
That might be a little high for things like a mushroom or something.
Hey, Greg, before we move away from flow, what's your take on the alternating gyre flow?
I just, from what I've seen from Jake's philosophy, it's not needed. Alternating is not needed.
If anybody has been to Ali's place, he doesn't have alternating flow on any of his tanks, and he's got some of the nice fish store tanks I've seen. I mean, maybe someone else sees another tank, but I mean, they're not alternating. He's got fixed speed tunesies.
And yes,
Is Ali paying you to say that?
That Ali guy doesn't know
Not
anything
yet.
about aquariums.
Dude, you better not be driving right now, Ali.
Shut up, Ben. In Ollie's, in his aquapora tank, he does have a wave maker.
Yeah, because he doesn't know any better.
I don't have a wave maker. I haven't had a wave maker since the 60s. I have a Tunzi wave box that moves the water back and forth, but not a traditional wave maker.
What's that from, the 70s?
Hey, Greg.
They stopped making the last good wave box in the mid-90s. The new wave box sucks, in my opinion.
Is there any way that you can walk inside and show us how your pumps are set up?
Nope.
Okay.
Looks like we have Jake back.
After hopefully Jake comes back here.
He's
I'm
back.
here.
He's back.
Back.
So you guys were talking about the back and forth flow.
Yeah.
For sure, I would much rather see people have good unidirectional flow than crappy alternating flow. And it's important to differentiate. There's 2 types of alternating flow. One is the oscillating flow that goes back and forth, like from a wave, which I truly love, but I don't think there's too many corals that like it in the aquarium environment. The oscillatory flow is really good for dislodging waste, but it's probably a liability for any tank bigger than like 4 feet, unless it's built like a brick shit house. That's what worries me, is the tank or the stand failure. If you have just a 2-3 foot tank, that's kind of like the safer place to do it. So you were asking about lighting?
So yeah, I was asking, what are your thoughts on lighting? You have an opportunity to use so many different brands, and just curious. I tell people all the time how a long time ago you called me and you told me, dude, you got to get these new AI Vegas. They have the magic LED. And I'm like, what LED? You're like, the Osram, deep blue. You're like, it's where the magic happens. So, I've always respected your thoughts on lighting. So, curious, what are you liking now? What are you seeing out there? What are you using?
Well, let me just tell you about what I've done recently at the studio, and something that still surprises me, even though I'm doing it on 10 fucking tanks. I run my tanks 8 hours. Because I have so many tanks. If I run every tank 12 hours, I'm just going to get more algae growth, and my electricity bill is going to be through the roof. And this is like 8 hours with like 2 to 3 hours of ramp up, and then like a really small peak of like bright light in the middle. And eight hours, y'all. And because I don't want to scrape the glass all the time when you have like 50 linear feet of tanks, I'm like, and there's so many tanks. You'd think I'd have them spaced out, but I don't. They're pretty much all come on for about 11 and then go off at 7. And very recently, I've turned down the intensity on everything about 20-30%. I got this one tank. I need to start taking some measurements. It's my flagship Reef. I kind of trying to model like the tanks that I've seen at Worldwide Corals, a lot more frags, even acros. And I swear, man, some of these acros are actually growing pretty well. You know, a little bit on the richer, darker colored side. But if I had to ballpark it, I'd say there's no way I'm getting more than 150 par at peak. I'm talking about for Austera, Louisette, Formosa. I'm like, how is that possible? I look at it, this coral, I'm like, how are you growing so well in this dim ass light? Like, it's not that much brighter than just like ambient lighting. It's kind of weird. So philosophically, I have been really turning down my lights, and I think it's mostly due to all of our fixtures. You know, they're what, like 60 to 75 blue LEDs. Even the white LEDs are blue with white phosphor, so there's a big blue peak there, and that's what overlaps the most with the photosynthetic absorption curve for chlorophyll. But as far as like fixtures, man, like we've gotten to a point where you could buy them. You could probably go to Home Depot. You know, I think I should do that. Go to Home Depot, get some bullshit lights, put a blue filter on it. But there is no more like a super standout light in terms of actually just working. You know, now it's a little bit more about features and spread. You know, if you look at Ecotech Marine's light, there's only a couple lights that can go toe to toe with that in sheer performance. But from the Gen 4 to the Gen 5, I'm like, I was using 4 Gen 4s, XR30, and now I'm thinking I could use 3 Gen 5 XR15s because, you know, they're using so many more LEDs, but driving them at a lower current to get so much more light. The new Kessel is really, really sweet. I think, you know, the equivalent of like the magic spectrum that you were talking, that you had brought up or reminded me of, is 430. You know, 430 oftentimes is called violet. It is the closest to that actinic 03. You know, you got blue. Blue is bright. Royal blue is rich. UV is kind of crazy popping. But that violet right at 430, oh man. Whew. Yeah. Oof, I'm lobbying Justin at Ecotech Marine to make a Radion purple.
Yes, I heard you talk about that.
I'm like, man, you've pushed the spectrum a little bit more with the blue because they have the cyans now, which is right about 505 or 500 nanometers, which is really like a teal, and it really brings out your yellows and your oranges. And what was another color that kind of surprised me? Maybe the reds. But so they pushed it kind of bluer, and I want to push them purpler. And I think that's literally the biggest functional difference between Kessel spectrum and almost everybody else's spectrum. You know, a lot of lights today are very blue because they are some of the cheapest lights. Not cheapest, but most widely available LEDs is the blue and the royal blue, and UVs to kind of balance it out. But man, when you don't have that purple, that's my favorite, the 430 nanometer.
Yeah, that, like I said, I always thought, that has always stuck with me when we had that talk. And
I would recommend a 2 to 3 to 5 year old Kessel AI Ecotech. Am I missing anybody? Over new Chinese black boxes. I know that there's some of these black box lights that are $100. Some of them last a year or 2 years or 3 years. But man, using a remote for some controls and like having that big thick box and a really loud fan, there's always some compromises. And you don't know if you're going to get a shitty one.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
You don't know who's doing, if they do quality control on that assembly line. But I would, so, so that's the other thing. I want everybody that has like a 1 or 2 generation old light, man, the biggest gains from newest lights right now is really on features and maybe a little bit more even spread. Right when LEDs started, it was all about trying to focus that weak light, trying to get it strong. But now it's more about taking that really efficient LEDs and spreading it out as much as possible. So I have 0, if I wanted to, all my Gen 4s would be replaced to Gen 5s, but I don't want to. I love my Gen 4s. And the Gen 3, has a little bit more of a directional LED beam. But yeah, if you have 1 or 2 generation old LEDs, this is definitely getting to the point where it's like, we probably all feel it with our cell phones, right? If you get a new cell phone now and you have a 1 generation old cell phone, you don't really see that difference the way we did when you went from a iPhone 4 to iPhone 5 or yeah.
Cool. So let's see, what else was I gonna ask you about? Oh, there was, you did mention hold on.
Ask them about additives.
Oh yeah. What do you think about additives, Jake?
I have waxed and waned with different things. I totally stopped dosing iodine because that was fueling my coralline growth to a problematic degree. Like, it wasn't even funny. I was just dosing Lugol's at a rate of about 1 drop per 50, every few days whenever I thought about it. And then I stopped. And then I was dosing, some strontium and some esoteric trace element mixes. And then I stopped. But, all along the way, I was doing ICP tests. Nothing was ever high. Nothing was ever low, right? So if we're talking about the real chemistry additives, I think between our water change and a good 2 or 3 part dosing system, you're covered, man. You're covered in a way that you didn't used to be covered. Back in the day, if you just did a super basic 1 part calcium, 1 part carbonate, you were missing a lot, right? But now if you're doing a multi-part, you're getting a lot of it. And I know a lot of people are still doing enough water changes that it's not a problem. But if we're talking about more biological, less mineral, but more biological additives, the 2 things that I dose regularly is, what is it?
Acropower.
Acropower. And the newest one that is proving itself to be a good for my corals is the new Reef Nutrition AB Plus by Red Sea.
I'm curious about that.
Well, if you have like a diverse reef tank with a lot of fish and you feed a shit ton of frozen food, you probably have so much diverse nutrients in your water that if you add AB Plus, you're not going to see the difference. But I'm a notoriously very light feeder. Even when I'm feeding 3 to 5 times a day, I'm feeding tiny little pinches of flake food or pellet food, and I just can't feed my fish enough to saturate that nutritional profile of the water column that makes those corals just swole, So I've always been an Aquapower guy. And maybe like a year ago, I realized sure, I have a lot of respect for Sharon Ram, who is the lead biologist at Red Sea, who kind of makes the calls on a lot of the additives and chemistry and lighting that they do. And it occurred to me, is like, why would Red Sea not have a coral food? That seems like leaving money on the table if you're a company. I was like, is Reef Energy, is that their answer to coral food? So I started using that a little bit more deliberately. And you know, the other thing is exactly 1 year ago, I went to Australia and I collected some of my own corals from the outer reef. And by the time I got them, they were all the same shade of like light tan, with not brown, but just real light and just skinny. You know what a skinny coral looks like. You know what a skinny coral is. And if they don't have polyps out, how am I supposed to feed them? You know. So then I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna, on this tank in particular, I'm gonna more deliberately dose Reef Energy. It's called Reef Energy Coral Nutrition AB+. So this has been around for a long time in 2 parts, in 2 bottles. So it's like super pain in the butt. You got to keep it refrigerated. And so this year, they released a formula that combines those 2. Still needs to be refrigerated, but it's not going to get like really rank if you don't. They say you can keep it out and dose like a week's worth at a time. And they say it's got a 15% more effect. So I started dosing that as my food to try to get my super skinny, personally collected outer reef acroporas back in shape. And man, it was like a fast lane. You know, it's not an overnight thing. Oh my God, the next day they're super colored and have polyps. But regular additions, you know, small amounts every day. And for sure, the colors came out, the polyps came out with no other food. And so those are the 2 things that I'm dosing now. And I do it manually. Let me show you basically what I dose, how I dose.
All right, guys, just so you know, we have, we were getting a lot of background noise, so I've asked Michael to mute the people. If you have a question, use the participants feature and select raise your hand, and we'll be able to call on you for your question.
So the 2 things that I dose very regularly is AquaPower and the Coral Nutrition AB+. And the thing is, if I don't dose it for a week, it doesn't matter. You know, my corals will grow a little slower. They'll be a little less swole. But this is my ritual. In the morning, I get up. Certain tanks that are controllable skimmer, I'll turn off the skimmer, even though I don't have to. But I use these dosing bottles. So this is 30 mLs. And you just take off one of the caps and you can fill it up. Let me do this without, yeah. And then I just kind of sling it. Here's one for the homies. and that's it. You know, like 15 to 30 mLs depending on the system. And I dose about 15 mLs roughly to, let's just say 5 mLs per 50 gallons roughly daily. And a little bit of nitrate. I very recently started dosing nitrate on my Aquapora system because the lights were so bright, and even with all these 2 other things, it just wasn't enough, and I had to do this. And some of the yellower and pinker Aquaporas, man, almost overnight they were like, oh, finally some nitrates.
Wow. Okay. Now, did you bought those bottles separate? Because I remember somebody used to make an additive back in the day that had those bottles.
Who was it? Was it Warner?
Tropic
Marine that did that?
Tropic Marine.
Tropic Marine.
That was my next guess. My next guess was Tropic Marine. Yeah, so no, these are super cheap. You can get them on Amazon any kind of way. If you have a smaller tank, you can use squirt bottles.
Hey, Greg,
so if you have a smaller tank, like a nano tank, you can get these soap dispensers. And guess what? If you don't know how much it pumps out, get yourself a little container and just go blop, 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 and do the math. So if you have a nano tank, you can use this. And this way you're not opening up a bottle, pouring some stuff out, reading it, and it's not critical how much you dose. You know, you really have to be very negligent to go out of your way to overdose.
Well, the problem is you might dose some hand sanitizer into your tank.
Not if you put a label on it.
There you go.
Or on some of my bigger bottles, I've actually ripped off the
There
sticker
you go.
and then
Nice.
taped it back over. Oh,
Yeah.
We have a
another
couple
thing that I
questions.
do.
Yeah,
What's that?
definitely a couple questions.
We have a couple questions.
Okay, so one last trick I want to throw out there
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
is I make everything in bulk here, all my bulk additives, and I use food coloring. Literally just any kind of food coloring. And in my mind, let's see, alkalinity is blue, calcium is pink, magnesium is green. So that way when I do some dispensing and I walk over to the tank and I forget what I have in my hand, I'm like, oh yeah, this is buffer. Yeah, okay. So I actually add food coloring so I kind of can see how much is left. Because this is AquaPower, but it's clear, so it's really kind of hard to see. So there's no problem in adding a little food coloring. This is nitrate; it's kind of pink. So there's no problem adding some food coloring, so you can kind of see what's in your bottle.
All right.
All right,
So,
we have a couple questions. Mark Hardy.
Hey,
One.
okay. So I have you spurred a question for me when you're talking about trace elements with food, and you don't feed very much. You said I feed a lot. I literally dump food in, and so my concern is, what am I adding through food? I mean, there's a fair amount of food going in, like more than a shot cup every day. Probably sometimes 3 shot cups. So, and I don't know what it is. I mean, I think my only way to combat that is water changes. But I'm worried. Can I be spiking some trace elements? Because even I use the ATI, the ICP testing. It's pretty good. I think there's 50 or something, but I know there's a lot of stuff missing. So I guess
If you're doing water changes, that's probably covering you.
Yeah, I do. I don't know, 30 gallons out of 250 every month or so, whatever I can get around to it.
That's more than enough. So when we're talking about food, there's a few nutrients. You guys know nitrate, phosphate that fuels the algae within the coral. And the thing that's a little bit annoying is, in marine science and a lot of other sciences, they just talk about dissolved organic matter. It never gets differentiated. But that's what I think. It's not so much what's in Reef Energy, but that's what you're adding to your thing. That's what your corals are really eating. Some of it is the phosphate and nitrate fueling the algae inside the coral. But like, for example, Xenia does not eat anything. Xenia's mouth is only used for breeding. Like, they can only spawn out of their mouth. So Xenia has been shown to only take up dissolved organic carbon, dissolved organic matter. So that's the food that the coral nutrition is trying to imitate. And one thing I did want to add is I thought that Red Sea was tricky enough to add amino acids to the Reef Energy. I thought that's kind of what it was going to be. So while I started dosing the Reef Energy Core Nutrition AB+, I suspended the AquaPower just for a little bit. And after a couple months, I was like, corals aren't what they used to be. And I started dosing AquaPower on top of that. There's nothing like AquaPower, man. There's just nothing. So for you, Mark, I would say definitely AquaPower would be a good complement. But if your tank is doing good, like I wouldn't worry about the trace elements, man. Every time I've sent in my tests, they're just always just normal, Like, sometimes you catch a little copper, sometimes you catch a little tin. If you feed a lot of frozen food, you might have a little bit of selenium, I think.
Right. No, and really my real concern is, as I'm putting a fair amount in there, is so apparently the brands I've been using don't have anything horrible in it, right? But I could buy a new brand of XYZ food, and it's got slightly a little bit of copper in it, or slightly a little bit of arsenic, or slightly a little bit of.
Well, so it's not even about the brand, right?
Well, I'm not saying brand specific, but right. I use, I don't know, whatever I get for food. I may use this one month and I may use that another month. But where the heck's my jar? I mean, a jar this big lasts me a month or two of dry food. That's that's a Reef Nutrition jar, but I don't even remember what the heck's in it. But I'm putting a fair amount of material into the tank. And I may not be the only person doing it. And even on somebody putting less, it's not just, when you go to McDonald's, you're getting chicken in your chicken McNuggets, but there's also other kinds of things that are in that piece of chicken that you're getting. And that's all staying in a closed, in a closed environment, right? The only way out is, breathing through the air or being sucked out through the skimmer or coming out with your Cheeto. It's whatever I put in there is going in there and it's kind of stuck.
So I wouldn't worry about it so much. Maybe a little bit more on the frozen food, because these frozen food guys, Larry is very proud of saying that he goes to the seafood market and he gets seafood, like very raw seafood, and that's great. But there's probably a lot more fluctuation in the contaminants, even however minor they might be, coming from fresh seafood than something that's processed like that. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I would definitely be remiss to this entire audience if I didn't tell every one of you that you should really look at automatic filter rolls. This technology is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you could probably DIY a manual filter roll just like super easily. And definitely in the future, there will be no all-in-one tanks that don't come with an AIO. Like I was hoping that going to Interzoo this year, Red Sea would release a tank and sump that had an automatic filter roll. Because I've been watching this technology for like 12 years, come from like ponds to giant tanks to smaller tanks. And like my fish system is right there, and the reef system is back over there. Dude, I don't change any filter socks. I don't even have any filter socks here. I change a filter roll every 3 to 4 months. Sometimes I look over at that tank, I'm like, how long's it been since I even looked over at the sump? Anybody here running a filter roll?
I'm not.
I've been using filter socks for about 2 years, and since I live at home, I have my own washer at home. It's just convenient for me to just dump them in the washer and just have about 10 of them.
Been there. I've been there too, but you got to bleach them, and then you got to dechlorinate them, and they're never as clean, and they kind of degrade and they clog up. And the automatic filter roll has a secondary function of quieting the drain. They're quieting all the water. Your filter sock starts out empty and there's a lot of splish splash going on in there, and then as it gets kind of full, it's like really quiet, but then it gets really loud when it's overflowing. And for all of you guys with ladies out there, man, I'm telling you, the automatic filter roll is this what's up.
And what's funny is I ended up moving my sump outdoors because it was too loud indoors. So I ended up creating my own shed, and, we took it to the next level. But the wife wasn't too happy with the noise. Even when I first got it, it was way too much return, and I didn't know how to control the noise. But a filter roll is, it sounds like a good idea. It's just, I've never really seen like how much complete total cost it will cost me to.
So I would say the starter filter roll for everyone is going to be the Clarisy SK 3000 or 5000. It's about $350 to $400. But then the replacement rolls are like $10, and it's not, you're never worrying about filter stock. You're never cleaning the filter stock. You never have the danger of reintroducing chlorine into your system. It's directly exporting every piece of waste, like Mark Hardy was just mentioning about. It takes out the waste before it can break down. People want to, a lot of people want to say, well, what about the smell? I've never smelled anything, right? Because it rolls up on itself. And there's always kind of a fresh layer that hasn't degraded yet. Only if you're running in the most humid, most hot environment will it be able to decay quick enough for you to smell it. I will hold my nose up to mine. I'm like, it smells tiny bit oceany when I get real close. But no, they dry out. So yeah, filter rolls, man. It will change your life if you have one tank. So the SK3000 is going to be right up to an actual 800 gallons per hour, coming down your tank. So that means if you have like 12 to 1500 gallon per hour pump going up to your tank, that means you're probably getting about 800 coming down. So the SK3000 will be for you guys. SK5000 I think can handle just a little bit more. It's not that much bigger. But then if you want to step up just a little bit, Deltec makes the first good kind of large scale one. What do they call it? They call it a fleece filter. That one's more built, and it's $800. And I scolded them on the price of their filter roll because they're trying to get like 50 to 60 right now. But if you see it, you're like, you can go find that fleece somewhere. You can find that fleece and make it yourself. It seems expensive, but if you imagine if you filtered out mechanically every tiny little bit of funk.
Every time Luca brought the ball up, the Morris was in the game.
Oh, maybe.
Shoot, sorry, I accidentally muted you. I was trying to mute the other person.
If you have a balls to the wall filter roll, it is preserving your pumps by catching stuff from going into it. It's preserving your protein skimmer by mechanically filtering all the crap before it goes into your needle wheel. It's reached prime time. And for me, man, the filter rolls, I will not set up another tank without it. I'm still kind of in the process of trying to retrofit one onto my water box and onto my Red Sea.
Oh, actually, I'm going to hop right in again just because I like to hear myself. So that brings up another issue I have. I'd love to buy a filter roller, an automatic filter roller. I haven't bought a new part for my aquarium in probably over a year and a half, and I'd love to have one of those. I don't know if it'll fit or how it fits. I mean, you go to some place and online you look and you're like, gee, will that actually go in there? How's it going to work?
You're absolutely right, Mark. That is the biggest thing that is holding more people back from using them. Coral View tried to put out this thing called the Clear that was supposed to be kind of a drop-in thing for filter stocks. I've still yet to see one out in the wild. And I think it's one of those things that it's built to such small tolerances that it probably works really great at first, but not great super long term. But Mark, you nailed it on the head. I've had to kind of think ahead on installing these things because I don't even want to just drop it in the sump. I want it elevated, right? You're not going to have if your filter sock is drowning, basically, it's not going to filter nearly as much as if it's basically elevated out of the water where gravity can pull up through it. So that's one of the things that's kind of holding back the mass adoptions. It's not like a plug and play, but I really wish anyone would just buy the fleece part and then just kind of use a Tupperware and just kind of manually turn it, and just kind of make it fit for the systems because it's really easy idea. But Marco's right. You kind of need a little bit more vertical clearance just so that gravity can be as efficient at pulling water through it.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Victor, go ahead. Victor, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So you mentioned you're dosing nitrates. What are you dosing for nitrates, and how much of it?
To be honest, I'm still very much experimenting, and this is only for the acros because I notice through some testing, first of all, one of the things really holding me back from getting a really clear picture of the nitrate situation in any of my tanks is every nitrate test kit sucks. It's funny because before you can do something new like this, I had to buy every nitrate test kit and be like, all right, which one is worth anything? Because a lot of them go 0, 5, 20, 100. Like, all right, well, that's not really giving me any freaking information, is it? So that was the first step. And I found that the Elos test kit had the most resolution in the low range. So you can kind of tell if it's like a little bit pink. To me, that's 1 ppm, and then you can kind of see 2, 5, 10, and then it's exponential from there. So Hannah is right around the corner from releasing a nitrate checker, which is going to give us a real number. So I don't have a good answer for you, but with the unclear picture that I was able to get from the Elos test kit, I approximate that my Aquapora tank, there's no rock. There's no rock in there. Not even the base of my corals. Now when I get corals, I cut off the base, put them on a tile. There's no rock. There's no sand. There's no algae. I was estimating that the Aquapora corals were sucking down about 1 to 2 ppm of nitrate every day. Just them. Just them. So I don't have a super clear picture. I just dose enough to keep it not 0, right? Just a little bit pink. So I can't tell you 1, 2, 5. Like, I don't know. I talked to a lot of other people, and I think if you're a coral farmer, and if you're trying to hit that bright, those really rich colors that you see on Instagram, that you see at the frag shows, you might want to hit or aim more for 5 to 10. We're only talking sticks right now, right? I'm not talking about anything else, just sticks. So if you want some of the richer, vibrant colors, you might want to aim for that 5 to 10 to 20, because that's the range that I got from Eye-Catching Worldwide Top Shelf.
Gotcha.
Jake, you just
what additive are you using?
Dude, so right now I'm using Neo Nitro because Brightwell's a sponsor. They just sent me whatever. But to be honest, if they weren't, I would just buy some potassium nitrate powder used for planted tanks. Right? What is it? Aquariumplantfertilizer.com. Just you could get a lifetime supply for $5, like Ziploc bag full of potassium nitrate. And but I like my stuff purified, and so this is the Neo Nitro from Brightwell.
Gotcha.
Jake, you mentioned the Hannah nitrate checker. Do you have any insider information on what the range is going to be for that guy?
I don't recall, but checkers are really intended to have more resolution in the low end, so I highly doubt it's going to give you more than 10 ppm, and maybe 2 to 5. I don't really know. I would be surprised if it went over 5, right? Like the checkers are really shine, giving you good resolution in the low end of measurements. So I would expect up to 2 ppm and maybe up to 5 ppm. But above that, then normal test kits kind of fill that gap.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, next question, Alexander.
All right, 2 questions real quick. First is, what is your opinion on vodka dosing? And second, do you really think that magnesium is a must for dosing if you're doing regular water changes?
Those are 2 really good points. Back in the day, man, I definitely led the charge on the vodka dosing, and this is back when I was still using a bunch of rock and at least some sand, and probably had a lot of bigger fish and shittier equipment, less water flow, less protein skimming. But now that all my tanks are bare bottom, bare bones in terms of rock, I haven't dosed vodka in a really long time because I've kind of gotten into using Nopox, and it's NO3PO4X by Red Sea. This is a methanol product. Because vodka, it's like if you're trying to light a cigarette with a blowtorch, it'll light your cigarette, but it might burn up a whole bunch of other stuff too. And that's what so along those lines, I would say I've kind of gotten a little bit away from using vodka per se, but some of the aquarium maintenance friends of mine that I have, they use vinegar because it's weaker. Because it's easier to add, because it's easier to meter out. So some of the guys that I think for off the shelf, vinegar, which is acetic acid, which is a weaker form of carbon than like vodka, that's probably the best DIY you want to do. But for me, I think I might still be dosing 1 ml of Nopox to my Red Sea tank, but I don't know. There's no algae in there, but now my tanks have gotten so clean because I great flow, little rock, little sand, and now I'm adding nitrate on purpose. The Nopox has been my preferred solution for maybe like newbie hobbyists. But if you want something off the shelf and you're trying to address, what are you trying to address something specifically?
No, you were just mentioning about carbon before, and so I still use vinegar. I'm still a new, or not vinegar, I still use vodka. I'm a pretty new reefer, but I love this stuff and I can't get away from it. Every time I stop, I'm like, I have to go back. I'm not an alcoholic, I promise.
What is it achieving for you, though? What are you trying to, less algae? Or?
I get a lot less algae. It seems to me that the water's a lot clearer. And it's an easy way, because I live in Europe for 3/4 of the year, to manage those problems when I'm gone.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good cruise control thing. And then while we're talking about it, some of you guys have probably heard of Vibrance, and I've been using a different product called Brightwell Razor. And why did I start using it? So I didn't even know what the shit is for. Like, if you read the label, it doesn't make any sense. You're like, I don't know what this is for. It kills all algae. It kills all algae. If we rewind the conversation to everything that I was saying about low ecology reefing, my nano tank at the very front of the shop and the flagship 170-gallon tank both got doses of Brightwell Razor. Eradicated every trace of hair algae and Valonia. If any of you guys have any Valonia that you ever have to manage, do yourself a favor, get some Brightwell Razor, follow the instructions to a T. You won't notice very much in the first week, but in the second week, you'll notice, hey, you know what? That algae looks kind of dead. And what you don't realize is that the algae is all dead, meaning it can't grow back. There's nothing to grow back from. And the 2 tanks that so far I have dosed with Brightwell Razor, I mean, they just look so freaking clean. My buddy Mark Vanderwall, he did this in Atlanta. He did the same thing, and just Valonia eradicated, Bryopsis eradicated, Derbesia, Enteromorpha, all that shit is gone. It probably kills a couple other things without messing with any corals, with any fish, and it will dramatically change how your tank looks, especially if you have a super old tank. You got dense growths here and there and everywhere. Man, you got to get on that razor. Or if you're starting a new tank and you want to just kind of just clear cut all the algae out of your system, it will change your life, man. It really will. And the thing is, you dose it once. You dose it once, you kill all the algae, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, what does Valonia even look like? It's crazy.
Awesome. Okay, next question. We've got Sabina Reefing.
Sorry about that. I was trying to get my mouse to unmute myself there. So I had actually 2 questions. One is, I did a really good job of preventing all pest, aptasia, everything in this 300-gallon, but I have vermitid snails. And I've tried bumblebee snails. I've tried wrasses. How do you kill them?
Mechanically. Mechanically.
That's what I've been doing.
Well, no, I'm pretty sure I would put money on you have not cleared out your overflow box.
I have done my best. I actually have done my best.
All you have to do is turn your flow off, drain your overflow box, put fresh water in there with some acid. Same thing with your sump. And I guarantee you will have no more vermitids. And then you drain it out. And
that's 110 gallons of acid and fresh water.
In your overflow box?
In my sump, yeah. That is
well, your sump is probably well, that's not even that much. We're talking about fresh water.
Yeah. I don't keep but 50 gallons of fresh water on hand.
I'm talking about
RDI.
Water.
Oh, okay. Tap water. Okay.
Any kind of tap water. Just drain it, just drain the salt out, fill it with some sulfuric acid, give it about 5-10 minutes, drain it back out, fill it with seawater, and then just be like a hawk everywhere inside your tank.
I was really hoping you had the magic secret, but I'm glad that I'm not completely lost because that's what I've been trying to fight. And thank you for the advice. And I had
So I've always dealt with vermitids, and only very recently am I seeing some. You know how they got into my tank? Fucking clams, giant clams, from the wild, just tiny little ones. I started noticing, like, oh no! But you have to get them every time you find it. You cannot wait till tomorrow. But this is the thing: if you're mechanically trying to kill vermitids, you have to hit that overflow box first, because the sump you can probably see, but the overflow box, what are you going to do? Get a flashlight in there and just, that's not practical. But the overflow box is where I would start, because the sump you can probably see everything in there, unless you have a bunch of rock.
I don't have any rock. I don't have hardly anything actually in my sump at all.
So I think you might be able to train a sharp-nosed puffer to eat them. This has been an idea that I've never tried out.
Don't they kind of like hard corals?
No. They would go more after like feather dusters. I don't think they would do clams. Maybe tiny little clams, but a big clam is big enough to close up. But
so
I think
just the feather dusters that are my wife's absolute favorite.
Yeah. Get that overflow box, man. I bet you that's the reserve.
Okay, and then the part two of the question is, I switched recently from doing a skimmer to doing a refugium, just because I don't get a chance to do much work on this tank. And my problem is it has dropped my nitrates. And when I say drop my nitrates, I mean from 15 to undetectable, and I cannot get them back up. And I'm running 3 hours a day of light.
So what's the problem?
Well, the problem is my corals turned white.
We'll take out the refugium then. But you said light.
It works a lot less.
Is it a refugium or is it a algae scrubber?
It's just a Chaeto, just a chamber with Chaeto.
Okay, so that's not a refugium.
Okay, it's a chamber with Chaeto.
Well, all right, we'll just harvest it more aggressively.
But I've been aggressive, but I mean, I can't get it up above 1.
Lower your lighting.
Okay.
For the.
That's an easy problem, but whoever said that's a good piece of advice. If your corals are really light, just reduce your forward period or your intensity, but one first, not both.
I was saying on the refugium, because the refugium or your Chaeto box only works when the light's on, or pretty much only works when the light's on.
It's at 3 hours right now, 3 hours a day, 21 hours off.
Bring it to 2.
Thank you for the advice, Jake, and thank you.
Vermitids, man, you just got to be persistent. One thing about vermitids is they will respawn in the same place. You might have noticed that. They like a high flow space. When you put food, you can always see their slime trail. And I swear to God, man, the reef tanks before I got ahead of this ecology in my tank, they would be like certain places where they would always respawn. So I always went to look there, even if I didn't know they were there. I'm like, oh yeah, sure enough, there it is.
What did you use to mechanically rip them off? I've been using dental picks and just shoving it in, like scrambling it up.
Yep.
Dental pick too?
Much.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much that's it. It's very satisfying. I do it when I'm diving too. But over there, the opening is like this big. I just take a hammer and chisel, just dunk, dunk.
So I'm just going to jump in. When you
No.
mechanically remove. I'm sorry.
Don't jump in. That's bad precedence, Mark. You're coming up here. You'll.
I know what he was going to ask.
Right.
He doesn't even have to say it. When you mechanically scramble them, as Sabina was saying, they're dead. I don't worry about them going back into the tank. Obviously, if I can help it, if I pull the clam out, I'm just going to, scrape it off and let it fall somewhere else. But I don't worry about them being in the tank, right? They can only make one shell. They're not going to crawl and make another shell. They are a snail. If you scramble them, that's it. It's something in a wrasse. You probably have wrasse or bristle worms or things to eat them.
All right, we've got a question from Richard.
Hey, real quick before Richard asks his question, Adam, just so you know, in the notes, whoever is iPhone stated that they've used bumblebee snails that have helped him with the vermitids.
I
don't
bought
know.
110 of them.
They don't work. Got it. Next. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I had a question for Jake. Being that the last time I really traveled since the recent Arizona trip and seeing a bunch of stores and trade shows and whatnot was in March, and that's when I saw Jake last. He has some great shops in his area: Aquatic Arts, Tropical Pet, and just recently there's like a lot of fresh blood in his area. There's a Mile High Tides, and just recently Big's Lagoons opened up during a pandemic. Have you been to that store? And
I haven't been to Big's because I've been to a lot of stores when they're opening, and you know how it is, right? They just barely filled it out, and I'm patient enough to just like wait a few months when they actually get some inventory, actually get their tanks kind of matured. So I've been to Mile High Tides, and he's doing okay, but it takes a lot of operating capital to keep a store full. So when I kind of go in there, he's kind of pushing a few primo corals to kind of help pay the bills. Small frags of flamethrower chalice or whatever. But Biggs, I think they're a little bit more diverse. They had that cool corner booth at Reef Stock. But Mile High Tides is kind of probably the closest to downtown Denver.
Yeah, but I think Biggs is going to be that real hot coral place for you guys out there. Biggs Lagoons should be.
Nothing is going to touch Aquatic Art. Dude, think about it.
Chris has got years of growth in.
Well, he's got 20
crazy corals and things
30, maintenance aquariums to harvest from. Like he gets paid to take care of these tanks. He's been planting his own corals in them, and he's been known as the place. When I go to Chris's and he gets some trade-ins, oh my God, we're not talking little chunks. We're talking
just chunks.
One colony of torch, one colony of candy. A freaking chalice this big. It's stupid. Chris will offer me a piece this big, and I was like, I'll take one that big. But I haven't been to Biggs. They've been coming to Reef Stock for a few years, a little bit more diverse, but they're almost an hour drive from me. Kind of through town. So I'm just going to wait to make it kind of worth it. And I'm just not trying to go anywhere, but I know that it's kind of cool to see everybody's vision, and it's kind of cool that we've had 2 stores basically open up during the pandemic. And tomorrow I'm going to a reef show, you guys.
Wow. What show are you going to?
The world famous Steve Tyree Coral Farmers Market.
Yeah, he's not laying down during this thing.
Well, so my approach with it is I know that they've gone up. They had to, right? There wasn't even a choice. They had to spread everybody out. So I think the booths are going to be like 12, 15 feet from each other. I think there's like 12 to 15 vendors, and they've limited attendance to like 150. At this point, he's probably just trying to recoup and just trying to get it over with because they postponed and postponed and postponed. So I think I'm going to go out there and clean up on some corals, right? Because there's going to be way more corals than buyers.
Yeah, definitely so. All right,
they had to cancel the Steve Tyree show out here because of COVID.
When was it?
I want to say maybe May.
Yeah. So I think the Colorado one was initially in June, push back, and we can't hide in our holes forever, right? At some point, somebody has to get out there and get back to regular life. And this is going to be far from regular. I'm sure in a regular atmosphere, we could get, 300-500 people up there if it was properly promoted. So, I'm not expecting more than like 50 to 100 people max during the entire day. So it's not going to be like the old times, which is exactly why I'm going, so I can clean up some corals, go find some underpriced stuff.
If anyone travels and wants to see some nice shops, I would definitely, in Arizona, hit up both the Kona Reef stores. Are absolutely beautiful. Just very refreshing, very boutique-ish and things like that, and put a smile on my face. Limited edition corals, Nice looking store as well. I'm out.
So Chris Cap has 0 limited edition corals. These limited edition guys, they find out what he has, they buy it, and they flip it for 4x. Because Chris actually grows this stuff. You can walk into the store every single day and get a frag of Oregon Blue Tort for $60. You can get a smaller frag for $40.
Yeah, that was the name of the store in Phoenix. It was called Limited Edition.
Oh,
just to let you know, I thought it was kind of weird and to be like a high-end coral store, but it was just a run-in-the-mill fish store with nice displays, nice walls, and a good layout and things like that.
He just expanded it too.
Did he really?
Yeah, I was there. They got the next door shop as well.
Okay.
Nice freshwater too now.
Good for him.
All right, Cody, did you have a question?
Somebody unmute Cody.
All right, guess not. Let's move on. Okay, Mark.
There we go. Unmuted. So back to the fermented. So when you say mechanically, that's normally I just take my clippers and cut the darn head off the darn thing. And you were right. I'm worried, but I'm also worried. Aren't there eggs inside there or something? What I've been doing is taking Sally for the tritation needle and injecting them with 12% hydrogen peroxide, which is incredibly satisfying. They fizz like you wouldn't believe. But are there eggs and stuff in there that are going to go out and propagate those? I don't know. It's the honest truth.
I've been killing vermitids for a long time. And while I do try to make an effort to collect as much of a creature as possible, I've never seen an indication that somehow you scramble the eggs and they go anywhere. But that brings me to another fun point. My good friend Evan, who helps me out in the studio a lot, he turned me on to a very satisfying chemical solution. I use drain cleaner to kill everything. Lye, sodium hydroxide, Aptasia do not stand a chance. And like a $3-4 bottle of drain cleaner, that's a lifetime. That's a lifetime supply of lye. And it's got multiple uses. You can use it to kill Aptasia. You can inject snails. I've also used it to kill nudibranch from Montipora that I couldn't remove from the tank. And most of your hypodermic syringes, they have like a little bit of an angle. And lye, when you inject it, it slowly kind of congeals a little bit. So if you do it right, if you angle the needle just right, you can literally just kind of get underneath the coral and kind of apply it underneath to like a Monty cap or a thick afterburner Montipora or slow burn Montipora and get Montipora nudies and their eggs underneath. And you can burn off infections, right? If you have like a favid or some kind of plating coral that is slowly receding, you could apply a line of lye to just kind of burn that section, and it'll stop the infection. It's kind of crazy. I don't know how well that would work for a 3-dimensional aquapora, but for some of the 2-dimensional kind of semi-plating acros, man, drain cleaner.
So you swerved into another question, which I don't know if like admitting you got herpes, but the Aptasia. And I've tried everything. I've tried the nudibranchs and 3 times, and the copper band and my powder blue kills it. And I tried even using one of the wands, and it just makes more of them. So I just kind of left them. I guess maybe they're going to take.
So what you do with the lye is you turn off your water flow. And, I half inject, half smother, and just give it 5-10 minutes. And by then it's precipitated to the point and raised the local pH so high, it's melted, right? You would think that calcium hydroxide would do the same thing, but it precipitates so much more and locally that it's not as effective deep inside, if that makes sense. I have never had an aptasia come back from lye. And like for some applications, right, your live rock is super porous, and you might have like somewhat of an angle and it's super bumpy and you have little aptasias coming through. I'll just kind of blanket the whole thing and just kind of let the lye sit in there. It is really effective. I mean, don't get me wrong, if there's a hole or crevice that's deep enough for the aptasia to pull all the way in, of course it's going to grow back, but
and that's safe to put into the aquarium. I mean, there's really no.
It's sodium hydroxide.
And I guess that was my next question. Is I thought they were feather dusters, but I think they're hydroids. They actually blow.
Yeah, fuck those things. Fuck hydroids. That's another one of those pests that comes in when you introduce the entire reef into your system. Hydroids are one of those weird silent killers.
You just take a turkey baster and you could blow them and they'll actually detach.
Don't do that.
Right, but they're hydroids, right? I thought they were feather dusters. But...
If they were feather dusters, I think you would know.
Yeah, so okay, I'll try that.
Yeah.
So back to the aptasia. When you're doing that, is it a slurry that you're using, or how are you applying it?
So you take the crystals and then you just put it in some fresh water and kind of shake it up, and I just mix a few, like let's say, I don't know, it's not rocket science, just let's say like 1 tablespoon to 3 or 4 ounces, and then that will last months. But just experiment with it, because just like, a little bit goes a long way. You definitely want the hypodermic syringe. You definitely want to clean the syringe afterwards, because the stuff it's not thick like kalkwasser paste, but it's thick like just like thick brine.
And then is there a limit as to how much you do in one sitting? Like you wouldn't do them all in one sitting, or you just monitor your pH when it starts. Or you just go bananas?
Well, I'd never have enough aptasia to go bananas, right? I generally, like, I would say every 2 to 3 months, we go on a aptasia assassination mission. just do them all at once. Just turn all the tanks once, and then one person's a spotter, another person's going for it. But yeah, I mean, I would just do it in patches, right? So just try to do a patch over here and a patch over there. And I started out really docile with it, but then eventually ramped up to the point where I feel comfortable pretty much just fucking going to town. Once it's mixed and once you expose it to seawater, it's not reacting with anything else. It's sodium and hydroxide. You might as well just be adding some table salt to your tank. Be mindful that if you don't want any of it falling on corals immediately. But if some of it kind of tumbles on corals like after a few seconds or a minute, that's not a big deal. It's already done its reaction.
All right, we've got a question from Nicholas.
Yeah, Jake, just a real quick question for you, and it's kind of along the lines of the whole drain cleaner thing. So the main ingredient in drain cleaner is the hydrogen, or maybe I got it messed up.
It's lye.
Lye, yeah. So when you're
sodium hydroxide.
Yeah, sodium hydroxide. My bad. So when you're adding that to the tank, in what increments are you dosing it? Because I know specifically in drain cleaner, it's got a very high concentration, and that sodium hydroxide can spike your pH and alkalinity if dosed too quickly.
So I don't dose it to the tank, right?
Yeah.
I mix it in fresh water, and I keep that in a specimen cup. And I'm adding, 10 mLs would be a lot. And it's not mixing with anything, right? It's locally precipitating where I apply it. 10 mLs for like 200 gallons, that would be a lot of aptasia. I never do more than that. We're literally usually talking about, let's just say like 3 to 5 mLs, per 100 gallon tanks. But again, it's not mixing with the water. It's locally precipitating. It's the smallest amount of sodium, which is already what your water is made out of. Then hydroxide just combines with carbon dioxide to create carbonic acid to create carbonate.
So there's no real...
No.
All right. Awesome.
I just shared some that I found on Amazon that's food grade.
Jake, you better not be trolling us, because tomorrow you're going to see, 15 different tanks that all crash because everyone's trying to do live.
Yeah, I'm about to buy some right now on Amazon with the link I shared.
So Jake, I have a quick question for you. Is he still on? Oh no, he got up.
He said 1 second. He's gonna go grab his lie, I think, to show us to prove that we're not gonna kill our tanks with it.
I'm gonna try it. I got a little rock with some, I guess they're hydroids, because you blow on them, they'll kind of break off. So I'll do it.
I guess there's not a huge difference between that and using like kalkwasser, right? And making like a calc paste and
it will locally precipitate and not really interact with your chemistry. So this is my jar of lye. This is the second one I've made up here ever. Like I didn't find my jar of literally it just says drain cleaner. It's just lye. But yeah, if you could find better stuff, you're still adding so little of it. I wouldn't worry about it too much. No,
but just to be clear, not drain cleaner, right? Like I can't just go buy a bottle of Drano.
No, not the liquid stuff. It literally has to say somewhere on there, just pure
like
lye, pure sodium hydroxide.
Drink bleach.
Right.
Hey, Nate, I just bought 2 pounds. I can bring you some.
Nice.
Literally, if the club bought 2 pounds, that's a lifetime supply for everybody. Everybody. But just, start slow. Kill one Aptasia with it. Get a feel for how the lye turns kind of into a gel solution. I was super apprehensive when Evan brought this in. And now, like I said, I've started applying it to everything. I will go kill some Aptasias drunk. That's how little I worry about it.
Jake, I don't know if you know, but it was presented to me that the alkalinity portion of the Triton alkalinity is lye.
No, that doesn't work. I don't
Sure?
think that works. Yeah. You need actual carbonate in there. And yeah, there is a reaction where it... Are you sure you're not talking about Tropic Marin's weird, what was it, carbo-calcium stuff?
No, because in the reason why they said it was lye is that's the only way they could get the concentration so high of alkalinity, because you can only go so high with carbonate. With
I mean, maybe there's something too there, but obviously you want your carbonate and your bicarbonate. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's why they were having problems with their leaky bottles.
That's basically what I was told. Yeah.
So in which case, now it's the dry stuff that you mix yourself. I just find it super silly that this supposed premium brand is teaching people to mix their own elements.
I know. Crazy. All right. Is there any other questions, guys? Because as you have seen, Jake's lights are all out, and he's 2 hours ahead of us. So
I've got one question.
Probably one.
Yes.
I just wanted to know if any of us are ever in the Denver area. Is your studio open for tours or anything of that set?
It's not open for tours. It's not open to the public, but I will definitely, some of you guys I've known for a long time, and you know who you are. You're absolutely welcome, and everybody else is kind of a case by case. But man, I get so many requests. I can't even answer them. I can't even say no. I just come off like a jerk. You know how many people want to come in here and just tour around? That's what I want to do.
For sure. Thanks.
I have a question.
Go for it. You don't know how to raise your hand?
I've been doing it all night.
Go ahead, bud.
Other people have been jumping in. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes. So I am Laguna 25 with a sump. And I've had this green algae growing all over the sand, all over the rocks. And I have to blast it with a turkey baster every 3 days. And it's a mess. And then it floats up, and then I suck it up with the turkey baster, and in there it takes bleach to kill it in a container. And so I keep putting GFO on, and it's getting worse. And then I added a bunch more GFO, and it got really bad. So like planes, trains, and automobile, I think I'm going the wrong way. And I think it's like a dino, cyno, or something like that. But it's great.
So that sounds like a green slime. And so one common misconception about cyano is that it's from too many nutrients, but they're not algae. They're nitrogen fixing bacteria. They literally fix nitrogen from the air, even the gas that's in the water. So GFO is not doing anything for you, but I would try a cyano remover, like red slime remover, you know, because if it's a bacteria, like literally you could dose like a small thing of antibiotics, which will not harm your corals, and it'll straight kill it. That doesn't mean it won't necessarily, it might come back.
Right.
But that sounds like a bacteria, a green cyanobacteria,
Yeah,
which is really rare in saltwater tanks. I haven't seen green slime in a saltwater tank in a long time, so you should make frags of that, and they call it a limited edition.
I'll bring a little drop for you on your big tank. Thank you.
All right, Nicholas, we have a question?
Yeah, this is one more for you, Jake, and I'm just going to ask this as a very broad question and kind of get your take on it. So I know you mentioned earlier that you run your tanks bare bottom, and I know throughout the reefing community, it's kind of a big question, bare bottom versus sand. A lot of people's concern is about beneficial bacteria either being in the sand or whatever their argument is, and I just wanted to kind of get your take on that whole argument between the reefers of what's the best and why.
You know, that's my computer's almost dead, and you know, we've got this for 2 hours, so I think that's a really good question to kind of wrap it up with, because that really goes back to my philosophy of looking at a tank, and just by looking at the corals and looking at the reef ensemble, being able to tell what that aquarist is doing to the aquarium. And you cannot walk up to a reef tank and determine that it has enough or too much or too little surface area, right? There is no reef tank you can look at, especially in regards to the coral. You cannot say, oh, this tank looks like it's got a lot of surface area. No, you can't do that. And if you have a lot of fish and you want the surface area, get yourself, you know, any hundreds of different bioblocks that are available on the market, put those in your sump. You know, if you want surface area, put in your sump. But that being said, bacteria will find a way. They will find somewhere to grow. You know, they will grow in the tubes. They will grow in the pipes. They will grow on the surfaces of all your tank, of the rock. And if you need surface area, live or sand is not the place you should be looking to get it. And it's just going to, you know, impede your ability to give it the kind of flow that, you know, your reef tank needs, both for the biology of the corals and the ecological health of the entire tank.
Got it. Thanks, Jake. Well, really appreciate your time. I know it's getting late over there for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've spoken to SCMAS more than any other club. So, you know, it's interesting times to be doing these virtual meetings. But hey, we brought each other together, and we don't all have to drive home now because we're already home. So that's a plus.
Thank you so much, Jake, for coming out and speaking to us. Well, not coming out, but well, coming out of your house at least and to your studio and speaking to us. Really appreciate it. Always full of knowledge, and you know, that's what it's all about for us, is learning. So
yeah,
thank
you guys are one of the most progressive reef clubs probably in the world. I miss Reefapalooza, all of them, but especially the California. So hopefully we can get things back on track and can, you know, see you guys in person this time next year.
For sure, bud.
All right.
Thank
well,
you.
Thanks for tuning, everybody. And
thanks a lot, Jake. Really appreciate it. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Quick question. Where's this video going to be posted?
So we'll
on
post,
YouTube.
Yeah, on YouTube. We have a SCMAS channel. We don't have any followers, but we have an SCMAS channel. So, guys, real quick before people start checking out, after the last meeting, several of us hung out and, you know, continued to show off our tanks and talk aquariums. I invite you guys all to do that again. I think we went till like 10 something last time. So if you